Every year at BAM's Martin Luther King event, the keynote speaker is someone acclaimed in his or her field, and today is no exception. As the author of more than 35 books and a master of genres, Walter Mosley may be best known for his popular mystery series featuring the detective Easy Rawlins. Mr. Mosley's best-selling books have been made into films, won coveted awards, and been widely translated, and his mastery of the written word includes political commentary, literary and science fiction and nonfiction, as well as popular fiction. Mr. Mosley is a recipient of the O. Henry Award, a Grammy, and PEN America's Lifetime Achievement Award, as well as numerous other accolades. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you one of the nation's most popular and critically acclaimed writers, Walter Mosley.
Hello, Brooklyn. It's nice to be here. You know, I was very nervous. I wasn't nervous before I got here, but I got nervous listening to people talk because everybody's so positive, and you know, I live in America. You know. I was listening to the esteemed Congresswoman talking about the re-engineering of economics, and you know, I was sitting there thinking that, you know, the banks and the financial institutions and the insurance companies and the real estate companies stole much more money than Bernie Madoff could imagine. And we bailed them out instead of bailing ourselves out. And not only that, the re-engineering of the economics, I was thinking, it's true. Our economics are being re-engineered, which means that everybody is fired and hired back at 80% of their salary. The other 20% of their salary goes to the people who stole the money in the first place. And I'm sure they're willing to give money to Martin Luther King Day because they got a lot of it. And it's our money. Now, that's not my speech. But I just couldn't help but say it, you know. I was happy to see Mayor Bloomberg because I remember when Giuliani never came to anything that had one black person at it. You remember he used to send those little, you know, those documents that his, you know, secretary would write up, you know. I'm very happy that you black people are out there. I'm going to give a talk that I kind of whittled down from a longer talk that I have in which I do two things. First, I talk about who I am in America, and then I talk about what that means. I'm not talking about Martin Luther King Jr. particularly, but I think I'm very influenced by him in my way of thinking and in my way of trying to solve the problem. Because, you know, the problem has changed, and as it changes, our approach to it needs to change, and we need to include other people in that approach. So I'm going to read it because I'm not, you know, good at remembering complex notions. Who am I? I am an American from the soles of my feet to the hair that once adorned my bald head. An American whose black-skinned ancestors were stolen from their lives and cultures and piled in the holds of ships like so many sacks of skin. An American whose Jewish ancestors stowed their lives into the holds of later vessels running from 1,000 years of anti-Semitism that was soon to blossom into a Holocaust. An American whose ancestors walked across the frozen waters from Asia to North America, discovering a new world, a world that would one day be stolen from their descendants. An English-speaking American whose language is also whispering French from my Louisiana relatives and sublime Spanish from the Mexicans and Mexican Americans I rubbed shoulders with growing up in Southern California. A man whose music is the blues that became rock and roll, hip-hop, and jazz. Jazz that is the bastard and the heir to the unconsecrated coupling between Africa and Europe. Who am I? I am a man formed by history, but oddly lacking in a clear perspective of the past, a man with so much to me that there is no clear identity to grab onto or claim. I might be related to Thomas Jefferson or any of 10,000 masters who raped and sometimes even loved their slaves. Who am I? I am the target of admin and pollsters, census takers, and the evening news. To some, I am the enemy, both inside this nation and internationally, and to some, I am a brother. I can be at the same time invisible and yet profiled, counted and yet forgotten, imprisoned by circumstance and yet declared free by one of the great documents of political history. I am prejudged for my skin color, gender, age, education, and even sometimes for things that I've done wrong. I am a minor shareholder in the great corporation of America and therefore responsible for everything good and bad that we've done in the name of business. Things we did before I was born and events that shall occur after I'm gone. I am the amalgamation of all the ignorance, ambitions, yearnings for freedom, and religions of the world. I have been brainwashed so many times that innocence is second nature to me. I am a new man almost every day. I and mine were once colored, Negro, mulatto, black, Afro-American, African-American, brother, sister, Uncle Tom, revolutionary, good one, bad one, convict, malingerer, miracle, and so much more. In the end, I can say with conviction that I am America. Through my veins run 10,000 years of history that touches every continent, deity, and crime known to humanity. This history is not composed of false accounts of the past. It is the blood and the beat and the light that passes through my mind and yours. I am your sibling, whether you know it or not, whether you accept me or not. We, known and unknown to each other, form an identity that I can express but still not know, not completely. And for this state of being, I am infinitely grateful because it means that I can be a part of something greater than the individual while still at home in my heart and my skin. For many years, most of its history, America has stood apart in isolation from most of the rest of the world. Separated from other great and comparatively ancient powers by two oceans and thousands of miles, we have long lived in the solitude of our own image and counsel, allowing only one primary language and reveling in a notion of freedom not quite earned. The dominant peoples of the United States are not of one stock, not really. The vast populations have come in groups and in waves, up until recently leaving behind the worlds of our ancestors to remake ourselves and to be remade in the kitchens and workhouses, schools, and arenas of this brash new land. We are separated by distance and time from the old worlds, both east and west. America was colonized by Europeans who over time began to see themselves as one race. In the old country, they identified themselves by religion and language, by subtle and not so subtle physical differences, by bloodlines and names and region. The Greeks and the Romans called the peoples to the north of them barbarians. Accent and class, gender and faith separated people as much as color did, indeed, more so. It was only on the shores of America where race became the great uniting and the great dividing issue. Here we were necessarily broken down into groups based on race, or more accurately, color. There were red men, black men, and then there were whites. These white people were defined by the borders of red and black. This color coding was based not upon the old notions of cultural identity, but instead upon the driving forces of economics. The red man was roiling out of the past, a living history that the European settlers needed to deny. They were the first inhabitants of these shores, the rightful owners of every rock and stone, lake and meadow. To the colonizers, they were barbarians who fought mightily against the encroaching towns and words and religions of the European invaders. So feared was this pict of the New World that well into the 20th century, our fiction still portrayed their war on so-called civilization as bloodthirsty and evil. The settlers, the newly minted white man, were here to take this land from its inhabitants. Coming soon after that was the African slave. On the mother continent, these bound souls were not black men and women. They were Mau Mau and Igbo, Maasai and Pygmy, Bambara and Watusi. The modern concept of race, that is to say color, meant no more to the African than it did to the ancient inhabitants of Europe. Identity for the African was defined by art and song, language and religion, by clothing and the food people ate. But in America, separated out from common language groups and tribal affiliation, the African became the black man, another economic conquest of the European and those of the Middle East. The black man became property, no different than any beast of burden, plot of land, or edible crop. Caught between the indigenous peoples and the slave, the white race came into existence, thousands of miles from the genesis of any of these people. The red man was defeated and exiled onto ever-changing, inhospitable lands offered up by the conquerors. The black man was chained and beaten and made somehow into something less than human, less than even a barbarian. These so-called truths were forged in the one language and consecrated by the one God that was ensconced as absolute from shore to shore. And so, you see, race was formed by economic necessity, a kind of color coding of the various human elements and enemies of the system of trade and barter. I realize that the presentation of the idea of race in this manner is almost mythic, the brainchild of magical thinking. I will not deny this notion. It is true that the belief in my race and others is the manifestation of a spell cast over this nation so many generations ago that it's found our way into our primary belief systems, like any primitive barbarian religion. To prove this point, I shall make a simple declaration. I am a black man. I am a black man. This is the truth. This is a lie. This is an oversimplification. This is a confused notion. This is a declaration of war. It defines me certainly within the labyrinthine political, economic, and social definitions of American culture. I am a black man, but look at me. How can I make such a bold statement without some twist in my voice, some irony? My skin is surely not black, not dark brown, not even light brown. The only way to see it as black at all would be in the context of other colors in the same scheme. How can you call yourself a black man? I am often asked by people outside the system of American racism. Sometimes they say, other people surely don't recognize you as black. They think that this is a political statement I'm making, that I'm identifying with my ancestors because I don't want to let go of a culture. But this is not true on any level. I don't have to let go of my culture because it was ripped from the minds of my ancestors by European slavers here and colonized beyond any recognition on the mother continent. I didn't have to come up with the idea that I'm a black man in America. I just had to walk down the wrong street at twilight and spy me from a block away. The police were happy to stop me and remind me that I had no business in that neighborhood. Race is not a color. That is stupid. Race, as I have said, as I will keep on saying, is an economic coding system that hopefully has begun to outgrow its relevance. Taking this argument into account, I do not deny that calling me a black man, that me calling myself as a black man is somehow a travesty. I come to this revelation through a circuitous route. That is, one day, I realized that the people asking me why I define myself by color rarely, if ever, ask themselves the same question. I mean, what is a white man? They are pink, tan, olive, ruddy, freckled, milky, and chalk-skinned people. They are blonde, black-haired, brunette, and red-headed. So-called white people have a broad palette of views, but in my experience, it is rare to meet a person who denies his or her whiteness. Why would they? People blame me for perpetuating racism by my self-identification. And to some degree, this is true. Me accepting the color coding of the plantation owners and the factory owners and the men who stole the land that they made my ancestors slave on, to a certain degree, me accepting their explanation of my existence maintains their claim to power. But blaming a black man for his golden chains and earthy blues, his unaccountable ahistorical existence and deep-seated unfathomable rage is like blaming a housefrau for global warming because she uses a spray can once a year. She is contributing to the problem, but she is not the cause, not nearly. No. Racism, race itself is not caused by people like me calling themselves what they have been called since they were born, since their great-great-great-great-grandparents were born. Racism is born of white people accepting the appellation of whiteness as a fact. On the day that so-called white people stop recognizing themselves by that terminology, on that day, the linchpin of racism will be pulled out and the entire prejudicial mechanism of the new world will ground to a halt. And I'm not talking about political correctness here. I'm not saying that all we have to do is stop using certain words like white and black. No, I am saying that we have to strive for a place where people honestly don't recognize race as color, dialect, gender, or any physically manifested feature. The denial of race is not enough. The idea itself has to be disproved, discredited, and discarded, eradicated from the mind of the responsible, educated, and sophisticated member of society. How do we accomplish this feat? How do I, the son of slavery and sexual innuendo and chain gangs and street gangs fostered by prison,